Hello. Today we're going to talk about the gross anatomy of bones. And gross, like, it doesn't mean disgusting in this context. It just means what's available to the naked eye. So like when you look at a bone without a microscope, all the features that you can see. And as we're talking about this, I want to remind you that bones are organs. That might sound weird, but they're organs because they're made up of different tissues. Like they have bone tissue, of course, but also cartilage, nerve fibers, all those different tissues that qualify them as an official organ. So to start off, let's sketch kind of the generic structure of all bones, and this is going for short bones, flat bones, and irregular. Long bones are similar, but they're a little bit different, so we'll draw them next. So I'm just going to draw kind of like one section of these bones, but they have a top layer that's made of compact bone, and then like a wider middle section, and then more compact bone on the bottom. So this layer is compact bone. And this layer is compact bone. And then everything in the middle is what we call spongy bone. If you can imagine, the Eiffel Tower was modeled after spongy bone. So kind of drawing like all of those little beam-like structures in there. Or sometimes people kind of describe it like a honeycomb. It's hard for me to draw in a 2D thing, in a 2D structure, but maybe you kind of get what I'm trying to draw there. Spongy bone. Each individual beam, or like each individual line, is called a trabeculae. Trabeculae. Yeah, and that's it. So most of the bones are pretty simple. Got a little compact spongy bone sandwich going on. All of these bones do also have membranes that I will try to do in a light color. So there's a membrane that goes all the way along the outside. It's called the periosteum. Peri means on, and osteum means bone. So that's gigantic, osteum. And then the trabeculae also has a membrane on its inside, which is going to be hard for me to draw, but I will do my best. So it lines like all of these little trabeculae in here. So every single little curve is covered in endosteum. Endo means within. Membranes help contain, and they also provide a place of attachment and a place for vessels and nerves to be able to connect. So all of that, it would be on the whole bone. I think I'm going to stop drawing it now, but you get the idea. That inner membrane is called the endosteum. And then what takes up the rest of the space, where like we didn't draw anything yet, that is where the bone marrow would be. So like this wouldn't be empty, that would be full of red bone marrow. And remember that red bone marrow makes blood cells. It's that hematopoietic tissue. So red bone marrow. Yeah, that is the generic structure of bone. Let's take a look at this. I'll have to erase everything I drew so that we can see it. But this is that picture that I was trying to draw. So hopefully you can recognize a few structures more accurate of what the trabeculae look like, zoomed out right here. And we can't see any of the membranes, but they would be there. And then if you can just imagine that in living bone, bone marrow would fill all these holes we're looking at right here, like that would be bone marrow, that would be bone marrow, that would be bone marrow. Okay, let's take a closer look at a long bone. So those are the bones that are longer than they are wide. So let's start off with trying to draw that. They have a long section, and then the ends sort of flare out. I wonder why the ends flare out. It must have some connection to its function. We'll learn more about that when we talk about bone markings, but basically they help form joints and they give places for muscles to be able to attach. And we have different terms for different parts of the bone. The long section in the middle is called the diaphysis. Yes, I will spell that for you. So this whole part right here is the diaphysis. It's also referred to as the shaft of the bone. It's just kind of like the long, skinny part. And then the ends, where they flare out, are called epiphyses, or singular epiphysis. Epiphysis. And then same thing down here. So all long bones would have one diaphysis and then an epiphysis on either end. In the middle of the bone, we have a like hollow cavity. Well, it's not exactly hollow, it is filled with something. But go ahead and draw a rectangle. And that is the cavity that holds yellow bone marrow in adults. Let's go with a nice yellow color and let's see if you can read this. Oh yeah, that looks good. Medullary cavity. Medullary means middle, so it basically means a cavity in the middle of the bone, and this is where we find yellow bone marrow, and it's yellow because it stores fats, so all of our triglycerides are in there. And then we can add, if you want to kind of draw like a little shape, I'll tell you what that is in a second, and then we're going to draw another shape like this. And then we'll do the same thing to the other end, like a little outcropping, and then something to fill up the whole flared end. So notice that the medullary cavity is like the same length of the diaphysis. And then on the ends of the medullary cavity, that's where we start to see more spongy bone. So I'm going to try to add some trabeculae there. And then also the epiphysis is filled with spongy bone. So over here, more trabeculae, which is another word for the structures inside of the spongy bone. This part right here is compact bone, just like on our other structure. And then what we're trying to draw in there is the spongy bone. Okay, a few more things. We're going to see the same membranes on this one. So I forget what color I used the other time, maybe green. There is the periosteum that covers most of the outside of the bone. I'm trying to draw it just on the outside. You can pretend that I'm doing it perfectly. And again, that is where our vessels and nerves are going to go through and attach. Oh, that's another weird thing to think about. Like, bones are alive. They need blood supply. They have to have a way to be able to get their nutrients and get rid of their waste products. So, periosteum, the membrane on the outside of the bone. And then if you noticed, I didn't draw it on the very end of the bones. And maybe you can tell me why. The tips of the bones don't have periosteum because they have cartilage. Remember that hyaline cartilage that's on the end of the bones and help the bones kind of like form joints and move? So that's our articular, which means joint, articular cartilage. And then on the inside, we have that end osteum again. And it's going to line every single little trabeculae, just like this. It's going to line this one as well. And then we need to add in our red marrow. So anywhere that has spongy bone is going to be full of red marrow and a living bone. So like all of those pockets of red marrow, all those pockets of red marrow. And I mean, that makes sense. We need a lot of all blood cells. They don't live very long. We have to be constantly replacing them. So, red marrow cavities. The head of your femur, that big thigh bone, has a really big epiphysis, so that's a good spot if somebody needs to be able to collect a bone marrow transplant. And your hip bones have a lot of red marrow as well. Okay, let's think if there's anything we forgot. Yes, so this space, if you notice, I'll highlight it. I left a space between, let me get a better color for you guys. Let's do dark blue. Okay. I left a space between like the red marrow right there and right there. That is where your growth plate is. So, that's the part, like bones aren't able to grow from the entire length. They just grow from one section, and that is the growth plate. Since it's near the epiphysis, the official name is epiphyseal line. Epiphyseal line. And just like the articular cartilage, that is also made of hyaline cartilage, and it is where the bones grow. You might know someone who actually broke their bone along their growth plate. It's fairly common because, as you can imagine, like the cartilage gives it a weak spot, and if you break your growth plate, then your bones might not be able to grow anymore, so that's no fun. Yeah, I want to ask you guys what questions you have, so email me those. And then I am revealing the fancy picture of what I just tried to draw, so we can compare our sketch to this. Hopefully you can orient yourself. I like this chunk right here where they took out that bone, because you can really see like that's the spongy bone, and then that dark part right there is their end ostium. They draw it nicer than me. And then I love this, like there's a vessel and it's going into the bone and it's going all the way through. Like that just reminds us bones are living tissues and they need a blood supply. Here is an image of a living bone, or recently living bone. And this is the diaphysis of the bone, and I know that because that is the marrow cavity. And then all of this stuff right here, that would be the compact bone and marrow inside of it. Notice it's bloody. Bones have blood. And then this is the epiphysis of the bone, like the top of the femur head has been cut off. And I can tell that because all of this is spongy bone. This darker section right there is compact bone. And I think I can even maybe see a little bit of the medullary cavity through here. But that honeycomb structure means it must be the epiphysis. Ooh, this is a really nice section of compact bone right here. Yeah, that's a wrap. So email me all your questions.